Someone in Trouble, Chapter 15, Two Little Words. Something wasn't right. It was hard for Robbie to put his finger on. Were the kids playing less than usual? No, that didn't seem to be it. They didn't play as recklessly as they used to, but they still filled their days with all sorts of games, many of which Robbie even took part in. Maybe they weren't eating enough? That wasn't it either. As many slices of cake as he could ply them with, the kids still rounded their meals out with more than enough of that despicable sports candy. They still got into trouble now and then too, which Robbie made sure to keep up with and save them from whenever they needed saving. Everything seemed right on the surface, but still there was that something niggled at the back of Robbie's thoughts whenever he spent time with the children and saw those strange moments of introspection on their faces, momentarily lost in thought. Like a whisper in his ear, it was trying to warn him that he was missing something. Whatever it was, it created a strange sort of unrest among the children. And if the children couldn't rest, neither could Robbie. Sitting in the town square one day, Stingy happened by and joined Robbie on his favorite bench. The boy didn't say anything at first, acting casual. He even hummed a little song while idling there. It was not quite the level of quiet companionship that Robbie normally cared to tolerate, but he could tune it out easily enough, so they sat like that for a few minutes. Stingy made sidelong glances at Robbie then, too, brief little peeks up at the man's face, before averting his eyes and observing a passing butterfly with intense focus instead. But his looks kept drifting back to the villain. Eventually, Stingy must have gathered up his courage enough for whatever he was angling for, as he finally cast an offhanded question Robbie's way. "Hey, Robbie," Stingy said with practiced nonchalance. "Do you think I could have your cufflinks, perhaps?" "My what?" Robbie arched an eyebrow at him. "Why would you want something like that?" The fancy boy desired some strange things sometimes, sure, but Robbie's French cuffs weren't going to keep themselves up. Well, whatever. They'd haggled over lesser things before. "I guess that depends. What'll you trade me for them?" "Oh, I don't want to trade," Stingy said. "I just thought maybe you'd, give them to me." "Give them to you? For nothing?" Robbie frowned a little, not understanding what kind of game Stingy was trying to play here. "No, I think not." "Oh," Stingy said with audible disappointment. He tapped his fingers on the arm of the bench and looked away again, but Robbie was on to him now. When Stingy glanced back over, he was caught in the man's suspicious gaze. He cleared his throat. "What about your pocket chain, then?" Robbie planted a hand over the pocket on his vest where his silver chain dangled. "You want to trade for that now?" he asked. Stingy hemmed and hawed and shook his head. Robbie's frown deepened. "You want me to just give it to you?" "That's right." Stingy nodded and held out his hand. "So will you?" "Are you joking? No way!" "But I'd take really good care of it." Stingy needled and cajoled him. "Please?" "What possible use do you have for my cuffs or my chain?" Robbie snapped. "Well, I don't really need them for anything," Stingy said. It's... Stingy looked off again, and his eyes seemed to see 1,000 yards away as he searched for the answer. Robbie felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. The words came pouring out of Stingy in a rush. Well, it's not like you have something really, really valuable like a special crystal that you need to keep safe, is there? So I thought maybe one of these other things you always have must be important to you somehow, and you can trust me to keep them safe for you, can't you? Stingy stared at the ground, his head drooping. But I guess not. Here, Robbie said flatly. He unfastened one cufflink, then the other. His cuffs flopped open on his wrists, but he didn't care. He shoved the links at Stingy. Just take them. Really? Stingy's voice cracked with his surprise as he fumbled to accept. Thank you, Robbie. I'll take good care of them, I promise. Whatever, Robbie said. Stingy didn't notice the lackluster response. He was too busy ogling over the shiny accessories in his hot little hands. Snickering and sneaking around in Lazy Park, Trixie and Robbie were making final preparations on a prank. It was simple enough, just a big bed sheet painted to look like a ghost and tied with a line that they were busy trying to throw over a tree branch so they could hoist it out of sight. Anyone who walked underneath would be in for a spooky surprise when the pranksters dropped the spectral sheet on top of their heads. It was almost ready. Robbie was yanking on the line, struggling against the weight of the draping sheet as it slowly raised up off the ground and in among the branches. Trixie watched his work silently for a while until he was almost done. Something clicked in her head and her eyes lit up like light bulbs. Hey! What if we climbed up in the tree instead, and when Ziggy or Stephanie comes by, we hang upside down and give them a really big boo? They'll never see us coming. It'd scare them out of their minds. I'm not climbing up any tree, Robbie grunted as he fought to keep the ghost elevated. And I'm certainly not hanging out of one by my ankles either. Let's stick to the plan. I just got the thing up there. Fine, Trixie sighed. She kicked at a rock with a testy swing of her foot and watched it bounce against the trunk of the tree and narrowly miss Robbie, who was busy securing the line to a stake in the ground. But the gears were still turning between her ears, and she came up with another one. You know what would really freak them out? Seeing a giant ghost. I can put the sheet on myself, and if I stand on your shoulders, we'll look huge. My shoulders are not for standing on, Robbie said. You weigh more than you look, you know. Then what will you do? Trixie demanded and crossed her arms in a huff. Robbie crossed his arms too, huffing right back at her. I'll do anything that doesn't involve picking up some squirmy kid or climbing up onto some high tree branch. It works perfectly well as it is, where we can stay safe on the ground and watch it go off on its own. Why are you so determined to break our necks? I know the prank will work, Trixie said. It's just... Robbie stiffened up, sensing what was to come. He uncrossed his arms and held up his hands to stop her, but the pig-tailed girl kept going. It's not the same just watching things happen when you can really be part of them and show off your moves. Anyone can set a prank like this. Who else can swing from a branch by their legs? Trixie's arms tightened around herself, and she glared daggers into the tree. But if you can't even climb a tree or carry someone on your shoulders, I guess there's no point. If that's how you feel about it, Robbie growled. Fine. Fine, Trixie snapped back at him. Robbie dropped to his knees next to the sulking girl. The sudden move made Trixie startle in place, and she goggled at the kneeling villain. Robbie glared straight into her eyes. Well, what are you waiting for? Are you getting on or not? Whoa, really? Trixie let out a sharp laugh. She was so surprised. Her arms uncrossed, and her whole expression opened up as well. "This will be awesome, Robbie! Thanks!" Trixie ran around behind Robbie and scrambled up on his back. She may have scuffed him a bit as her feet came around either side of his head until she was sitting on his shoulders. Robbie grit his teeth, and his knees knocked as he painstakingly rose up. "This is amazing!" Trixie yelled and threw out her arms with the thrill of being so high up. She laughed with the pure joy of it, and Robbie held tightly to her legs to keep her from falling right off. "You're stronger than you look, Robbie." "Don't look too hard," Robbie wheezed as the rambunctious girl dug her heels into his chest. He staggered around a bit with his center of balance thrown by Trixie's added weight, but the girl just laughed again. "Get closer to the tree so I can pull down the sheet. This is gonna be the best prank ever." "It sure will," Robbie grumbled. He just wasn't sure who the prank was on now. Robbie could count on Pixel for an afternoon firmly planted on the couch, with nothing harder to hold on to than a video game controller. They would sit for hours with their faces glued to the TV screen until they went cross-eyed. Expecting another long gaming session this time, Robbie made sure to limber up before taking his seat, shaking out his arms and legs, and even his wrists. The last thing he wanted was a hand cramp during a difficult level. "So, what's it gonna be?" Robbie asked as he settled himself down in his spot on the couch. He'd sat in that spot so often and for so long that the cushion had started to mold to his shape and had a hint of his outline, so he had to wriggle around to get just right and comfortable. Crawling through a dungeon? Or racing some cars? Maybe jumping on some platforms? "Actually," Pixel said, "I thought we could play a new game I got." "Whatever," Robbie said. "I'm ready for anything." "Well, first you'll have to stand up," Pixel said. Robbie squinted at the boy to see if he was being serious. He was reluctant to get out of his perfect spot, but it didn't look like they were going to be playing any of the games he'd expected. With a grudging creak in his back, Robbie pulled himself out of his seat and got back up. "Now what?" Robbie asked. Pixel turned away from the entertainment center and puttered around his room for a moment, picking through his gadgets and computers and leftover boxes from snacks. He'd never been the tidiest kid, and it hadn't gotten any cleaner with the villain's regular contributions to the place. Eventually, Pixel seized on something and tugged it out from between a big computer tower and some piled-up hard drives and dragged it over. It was a large foam pad cut into a square. Pixel pushed the table out from in front of the couch and set the thing down on the floor, and that was when Robbie saw there were buttons, just like a game controller, on its face. "What's with the oversized remote?" Robbie asked with a touch of dread. "Inviting a troll over to play?" "You don't hold this controller in your hands," Pixel said. "You control it with your feet. Isn't that cool?" "What's wrong with our hands?" Robbie didn't like where this was going. "Nothing," Pixel said. "But with this, we can play my new game, Step Mania. You have to step on the buttons in time with the screen, sort of like dancing. Actually, I found this other game too that tracks your whole body's motion, and you have to copy the dance moves they show on the screen for that one, instead of pressing buttons. It's pretty cool how they do it." Pixel was on a roll, describing the mechanics of all these new rhythm games he wanted to try. Let's Dance, Beat Mania, Dance Revolution, Rock Band, Fit Sports, Exerbeat. Robbie felt himself growing exhausted just hearing about them. Simulated dancing and beating and punching and kicking and... "Enough!" Robbie cut sharply into Pixel's monologue. "The point of video games is not to move around while playing them. These aren't even games. They're just working out in disguise. What are you trying to do? Exercise or have fun? Of course I want to have fun, Pixel said. It's just... That was it. Those two little words dropped like stones in Robbie's stomach. Every time the kids opened their mouths and those words came out, it was all over. I don't know. Video games are great, but if we forget to take breaks and move around, we just get stiff and sore, and that's not any fun. A video game that can still get you up and moving around should be even better, right? Like, we're really in the game and doing things, and it helps our bodies at the same time. But if it would just be more work than fun, I guess... Not you two, Robbie muttered. Huh? Pixel glanced up at him. Robbie shook his head. You use your feet on this, you said? Robbie pointed at the dance mat. Yeah, Pixel said. Robbie prodded at the large, square pad on the floor with the toe of his shoe. When he nudged one of the oversized buttons, the game responded on the TV screen, beeping and flashing. Robbie retracted his foot, his toes curling up in his sock. One game, Robbie declared severely. You sure? Pixel flashed a smile. Hey, thanks, Robbie. Don't worry, this'll be fun. Let's just get this over with, Robbie grumbled. He stepped onto the center of the mat and stood there stiffly like a man marooned on a very small island, with Pixel excitedly circling like a shark. The game started up and blasted some high-tempo music. No time to back out now. It was sink or swim.